Well, let's just say first, those were outrageous comments that those individuals, including the President of the United States, made. Clearly, the crowd was hyped up, juiced up, focused on the Capitol, and rather than calm them down or at least emphasize the peaceful nature of what protests need to be, they really did encourage these folks and riled them up. Now, whether that comes to a legal complaint, I think we've got to really dig in and get all the facts. I know that I'm looking at a charge under the D.C. Code of inciting violence, and that would apply where there is a clear recognition that one's incitement could lead to foreseeable violence. We still have more investigation to do, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to work zealously and fully and let the facts lead to where they naturally go.
Are you looking at the president's role, or is he immune because of the Office of Legal Counsel guidance that has been followed that the president cannot be prosecuted? Sure,
Andre. As you know, the OLC opinion says that the president can't be prosecuted while the president is in office. As it turns out, the president has about 9 more days of office. And of course, the investigation is going to go on much beyond those 9 days. It'll be another legal question as to whether the president can be prosecuted after his term of office. I think the better weight of authority answers that question affirmatively.
This is Washington, D.C. Attorney General Karl Racine announcing that he's looking into charging Trump for inciting violence at the U.S. Capitol. And I would just say this, if you're a prosecutor building a case against the president and his allies for causing the mayhem that we saw only days ago, you'd probably feel pretty confident about your chances. And so that we're clear, it's not like the incitement was subtle or nuanced. It was right out in the open, using words like fight and combat, not only from Trump, but those around him too.
Now it is up to Congress to confront this egregious assault on our democracy. And after this, we're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down. We're going to walk down anyone you want, but I think right here we're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women. And we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them, because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong.
Stand up and fight. Stand up and hold your representatives accountable.
And if we're wrong, we will be made fools of. But if we're right, a lot of them will go to jail. So, let's have trial by combat.
There was also Trump's video during the riot that was pulled down by all social media platforms, where he didn't so much condemn the insurrectionists as he did air his grievances about the election being stolen by the Democrats and thereby justify the insurrection itself. And that's not to mention the daily deluge of lies claiming that the election was stolen, where he slowly but surely convinced more and more of the country that there was fraud, despite the fact that there wasn't, despite the fact that the court said no fraud, including a number of judges who he himself appointed, that the DOJ and Bill Barr said there was no fraud, Chris Krebs and the DHS's cybersecurity unit said there's no fraud, Republican governors and secretaries of state said there was no fraud, voting systems companies said there was no fraud, recounts and audits proved there was no fraud, and even Rudy Giuliani admitted in court that he wasn't alleging fraud. And yet none of that stopped Trump from perpetuating his disinformation campaign anyway, because he wanted the violence. It wasn't an unfortunate side effect, it was the goal. And so with that said, here's why this announcement by Washington, D.C.'s Attorney General is so important. Even though D.C. isn't a state, its Attorney General still functions as a state Attorney General as opposed to being under federal jurisdiction, which is to say, even if Trump tried to pardon himself, pardons only apply to federal crimes, not state crimes. So if he's charged in D.C. by the AG's office, he can't protect himself with a pardon that's already legally tenuous anyway, meaning that he might actually have to face accountability for his actions. Imagine that. And by the way, the likelihood that even a self-pardon would fly is slim. According to legal experts and scholars, a self-pardon is legally tenuous at best. First, according to Harvard law professor Cass Sunstein, the idea of a pardon stems from the English law of mercy or grace, and you can't show mercy or grace to yourself. Other scholars note that linguistically, you grant a benefit to someone else, not to yourself. But the stronger argument here is that, quote, it would violate the principle that no one can be the judge in their own case, which is the same legal opinion rendered by the Justice Department in 1974 when Nixon was contemplating pardoning himself as well, ultimately resulting in no self-pardon. Still, that's not to say that Trump won't try, but the point is that even if he does, a charge brought up by the DC AG wouldn't be impacted by a self-pardon or any other attempt by Trump to evade responsibility for what he's done. Now, I should note that no specific decisions have been made regarding whether Trump or any of his associates will be charged, but what this shows is that Racine is keeping all options on the table, and that would be in addition to the current impeachment that's playing out in Congress. The House is preparing to introduce one article of impeachment, likely on Wednesday morning, for incitement of insurrection. As of this recording, there are already more than 210 co-sponsors out of the 218 required for the resolution to pass, at which point Trump will become the only president in American history to be impeached twice. Almost makes you think he was lying when he called himself the law and order president. If impeachment passes the House, it would then go to the Senate for a trial, where 2/3 would be needed to convict him. And if he is convicted, the Senate could then vote to bar him from ever holding federal office again, which would need only a simple majority to pass. And at a time when the dangers of having someone like Donald Trump have become glaringly obvious, and with less and less of a downside as he quickly sheds support even from his own base, it seems that this conviction is actually much more likely than the last time he was impeached. Plus, we already have Republican senators who've come out and said that Trump should be removed. Lisa Murkowski said, quote, "I want him to resign, I want him out, he has caused enough damage." She was followed by Republican Senator Pat Toomey, who said, quote, "I think at this point, with just a few days left, it's the best path forward. The best way to get this person in the rearview mirror for us that could happen immediately. I'm not optimistic it will, but I think that would be the best way forward." And so when you consider the fact that not only did Trump just lose an election, but that he's now shedding support from even within his own party, it becomes apparent that Republicans actually have a vested interest in ensuring that he can't run again. He's clearly toxic to the party, he's clearly a liability in a general election, and yet in theory, he's still the frontrunner for the 2024 Republican nomination. So they should do themselves the favor of barring him from running, since it would actually serve to benefit themselves. Of course, whether they can pry themselves off of his coattails is another story altogether, but at least now they don't have any mean tweets to be afraid of. So while we wait and see what happens from a political perspective, we can find solace in the fact that the DC Attorney General is already well aware of his responsibilities in terms of holding Donald Trump accountable for his crimes. So Trump might try to get out of jail scot-free, but it looks like, thanks to his own actions, that train has long since left the station. While you're here, please check out my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen. I take a deep dive into the top stories of the week, and I also interview major players in the world of politics, like Kamala Harris, Adam Schiff, Nancy Pelosi, Pete Buttigieg, Katie Porter, Al Franken, Cory Booker, Jamie Harrison, Mary Trump, and many more. Again, that's No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, available anywhere you listen to podcasts.